morning. Those of you who came to Sunday school, thanks for coming back. That was unexpected, but I'm glad you did. And I want to thank you all for giving me the opportunity to come in and talk to you all. The last time I was here was about 3 years ago. You all have aged wonderfully. I have a little less hair than the last time you saw me, but I guess it happens, right? The last time Heidi and everybody came was about 7 years ago, so it's been a long time since you got to see them. We're really excited about the partnership that our two churches have together. As you probably gathered, we're church planters in Ancona, Italy, and Willamina has been a part of our church plant since nearly the very beginning. And supporting us and helping to see the church grow. So in a real way, I'm not just saying this, but in a real way, our churches are connected. It's a long ways away. We're 9 hours different. They're just wrapping up the dinner after our Sunday evening church service, and everybody's belly is full of pasta and delicious. We really do have the best potlucks ever. You can trust me on that one. We're just finishing up dinner, and it's kind of cool that we're having church together at the same time, isn't it? So, there's a church in Ancona, Italy now, and there didn't used to be one, so that's really good news, huh? And nearly every member of our church has been following Jesus for about 4 years. We kind of had a flood of baptisms all at the same time, and so it's kind of cool for me as their pastor to watch them grow up, like little baby sheep that they used to be. Now they're adolescent sheep. I don't know how long does a sheep live? You know what I mean? In sheep years, I'm not sure how many years that is, but it's exciting for me. That's the stuff that I wake up for, to see them start to take steps of faith and grow in maturity. And I want to thank you all for your part in that. We've been in Italy for about 9 years now. We just hit our ninth anniversary back in April. And after being there, and after being in a place for 9 years, you can kind of start to see the trends and the patterns in day-to-day life. You know what I mean? When you're new, everything's new and you don't really know what's going on. But after 9 years, you start to see these patterns of behavior. And, I probably shouldn't even say this, but I feel like I'm starting to understand a little bit about what makes Italians tick. You know what I mean? I'm sure I'll go back in September and realize I don't know anything. But now I'm feeling pretty confident now that I'm away from Ancona. And let me tell you a little bit. After World War II, right, happened in Italy. That's something already that many Americans cannot relate to. There hasn't ever been a war here, right? War is something that happens there. But for Italians, war is there, okay? And after World War II, the country was destroyed, devastated. I can take you to Ancona, show you places that the Americans bombed in Ancona, right? That there's still nothing there. And so Italy had a huge job to do after World War II. They had to dig out from underneath the rubble, right? Which is devastating, There were no jobs to be had. People just got to work rebuilding their cities, all the damage that the war caused. But slowly, as this goes, that recovery effort that happens after big wars creates jobs, right? Work. And so in the 60s and the 70s and the 80s, Italy got rich. They were a prosperous nation. You all know the fashion industry comes out of Italy, right? You see from all my Prada attire today, I'm sure. I'm just kidding. I don't have any of that stuff. You saw the Lamborghini we pulled up in, right? We flew it over. Yeah, that's mine. So Italy had prosperity, okay? But in the 80s and in the 90s, the economy took a nosedive. The global depression that all of us are experiencing hit Italy really hard. I don't know how much of this news makes it over here, but in Italy there's always this contest. There's Greece, Ireland, Spain, and Italy, and we're always neck and neck with each other for the worst economy in the European Union. It's a contest that nobody wants to win, but yet somehow they keep talking about it, right? Greece is already bankrupt, and Spain or Italy, who knows which one is going to go next, okay? Other more stable countries like Germany, they're sort of the economic stronghold of the European Union. they're kind of insisting we get our act together. Well, you know why, right? A lot of their money ends up helping us out, and they're kind of tired of it. Our political system is a mess. I could never, ever describe it to you. Literally dozens of political parties all vying for power. The Italian Congress has over 500 senators in it. 500 senators for a little tiny, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know what they do all day, honestly. You know what I mean? And every time we have an election, every Italian I ask, they're just like, you're a foreigner, you'll never understand it. And the corruption is everywhere, and it's completely an unstable system. Since World War II, the government of Italy has risen and fallen over a dozen times. Did you know that? I don't know if you hear about that, but our governments go away and start all over again all the time in Italy. It's almost, there went another one. Now, underneath it all, we're stable. It's not like, we're in line for bread or things like that. But on a national level, politics are a mess. The Catholic Church, you've heard of it, right? It's either seen as hopelessly outdated, some people even see it as a dangerous institution that shouldn't have any part of Italian life anymore. The Constitution of Italy, the first lines of the Constitution of Italy say that Italy is a country founded on work. But there's no work to be had in Italy. It's interesting, isn't it? So the bedrocks of Italian society, the columns, the things that keep the country afloat, are showing themselves to be anything but a firm foundation. I think the hardest part of this economic crisis that we're facing in Italy is the effect that it has on young people. I talked a little bit about this in Sunday school. Unemployment for those 30 and under is around 50%. So those of you who are getting ready to go for college, high school students, imagine graduating college and knowing chances are you're not going to find a job anytime soon. It's kind of hopeless, isn't it? What's the point, is what a lot of people think. We had a parent-teacher meeting with Francesca, our youngest. She just finished preschool. We had an end-of-the-year meeting with the teacher. Dads, well, moms too, but dads especially, why do they make us sit on those chairs during those meetings? I could have died. My knees were hitting my chin, Anyway, we're sitting at this preschool meeting, and out of nowhere, the preschool teacher started talking about whether or not she thinks it's wise for kids to start school a year earlier. You know how they do this sometimes, like a kindergartner will go to school a year earlier because the mom or dad thinks like they're ready, right? They're ready to go to school. And she said, well, yeah, academically they might be ready to start school, but socially they're probably not ready. They haven't had the kinds of experiences that kids an age 1 year older have. And this is no kidding. She said in this meeting, and if the kid starts preschool early, it just means a year more of unemployment after they're done with school. Preschool. That's what the teacher said to us. And you know what all the other parents did? They nodded their head and said, well, that's true. And I thought, that's hopeless. That to already know that your preschool student isn't going to be able to find a job 15 years later when they're done with school, 20 years later. It's really incredible how there's no hope. There's all the economic prosperity that they built up is gone. Prices have gone through the roof. How much is gas here? Almost $4 a gallon. We're hitting $9 a gallon. That's why we walk, yes. Income taxes for an average Italian are about 50% of their income. Sales tax is about 22% on everything we buy. No, there is no sales tax here, is there? There's no sales tax. What do you think it's like to live in a country like that? Yeah, there's not a lot of hope, is there? The economic crisis gets talked about a lot. You guys know how in America we name our hurricanes? Hurricane Katrina, they always have names. They kind of have a nickname for the economic crisis in Italy. It gets talked about so much that instead of saying la crisi economica, they say la crisi, which means the crisis. It's like the shorthand version of it, right? And nobody says, which crisis? They're not sure they know you're talking about the economic crisis, not the healthcare crisis, not the jobs crisis. It's the economic crisis. It's almost like it's the name of a person, right? Like this monster that's always around the corner, that's always the subject of conversation. I hear it almost every day. Look at your bulletin. What's the name of the sermon today? Ormai c'è la crisi. You guys want to learn some Italian? Of course. Everybody say yes, right? All right, the first word is ormai. Say it. Ormai. It's a word that means everything and nothing in Italian. It's like a filler word. But in this case, it kind of means after all. After all. Ormai is after all. C'è, the C with the apostrophe and the E with the accent, means there is. Okay, so c'è. Very good. La is la, you know what that means. And crisi. Crisi, okay? Now let's say that all together. Are we ready? Ormai c'è la crisi. Okay, one more time. Ormai c'è la crisi. Now say it with a little less hope. Ormai c'è la crisi. Right? Very good. I hear this all the time. Not a day goes by without somebody saying Ormai c'è la crisi. When I talk to families, but just shortly before we left, this topic of summer vacation came up, right? And so I'd ask somebody, hey, what are you guys, you going camping, do anything special for vacation this summer? And everyone would say, no, we had to cancel our plans. Ormai c'è la crisi, right? The schools get less and less money from the state all the time. And every year they're asking the parents to fund more and more of their kids' public school education because ormai c'è la crisi. Very good. Young people decide to move in together instead of get married because they can save, right? Instead of 2 rent payments, there's only 1 that way because ormai c'è la crisi. Very good. You guys are very Italian. I'm impressed. Those who do have jobs, who are fortunate to have jobs, work themselves to death because you gotta. You don't know how long you're going to have that job. Ormai c'è la crisi, right? The financial crisis has impacted every nook and cranny of Italian life. People are nervous, people are scared, and everything seems out of control. Okay, question. Are things in Willamina, Oregon really that different? I think maybe we're probably a little less dramatic about it. We don't have a nickname for the economic crisis, but I know what the job situation is like here. Unemployment isn't at 50%, but we hit 10% for the first time in a long time in the United States, right? It's interesting. Ancona and Willamina maybe aren't as different as they seem. You guys remember the Sermon on the Mount, right? We just studied the Sermon on the Mount in church. 3 chapters, Matthew 5, 6, and 7, right? Honestly, a lot of times when I read the Bible, I try and put myself in the situation, in that, like, what did that sound like to the people who heard it for the first time? And I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but I really feel like people who heard what Jesus had to say in the Sermon on the Mount might have thought he was crazy. Or at least so radical that this isn't a guy that we want to have anything to do with, right? Churches now, right? Willamina Christian Church, we try and make things inviting for people when they come in the door, right? There's coffee available if you'd like to have a drink before you come in. We have comfortable pews to sit on, right? The Sermon on the Mount is the opposite of that. It is completely uncomfortable. Every single thing that Jesus says is scandalous. It's something that would have shocked the people that they heard. How many of you all woke up, looked yourself in the mirror, and said, I didn't murder anyone, I'm doing good? Honestly, some mornings with 4 kids, I'm close, right? But Jesus said that means nothing, because if you ever got angry with someone, you're a murderer. Welcome to our church, right? Right? He said, you guys probably heard eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, right? But Jesus said, no. You let people take advantage of you. You let people abuse you. That doesn't help the church grow, does it? That's not inviting. That's not attractive. God said, love your neighbor, hate your enemy, right? Jesus said, love everybody. Love your enemy. I'm not very good at that. Jesus talked about judging people. He talked about specks in people's eyes, planks out of our own eyes. Guys, I don't know what it was like to hear that, but I think people thought, I don't want anything to do with that guy's church. You know what the worst thing that he said? Be perfect. Be perfect like God is perfect. Not just people perfect, godly perfect. How are we doing with that perfection? Not very good, right? And that's what Jesus said. That was his standard. We talked about a lot in church, in church in Ancona, and we said that a lot of times I feel like in churches we try and lower the bar, right? To make being a Christian easier. Jesus blew the bar away. He put it so high that none of us can ever get there. Ever. The bar is perfection. Yeah. So the conclusion to this sermon, be perfect, is found in Matthew chapter 7. You guys can turn there with me if you like. Matthew chapter 7, the very last four verses, verse 24. Remember, this is the conclusion to the Be Perfect sermon. Therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a man who built his house on the rock. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against that house, yet it did not fall, because it had its foundation on the rock. But everyone who hears these words of mine and does not put them into practice is like a foolish man who built his house on sand. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against that house, and it fell with a great crash. So basically, Jesus is saying, everything that you heard me just say, be perfect, don't judge, love your enemy, do it. These aren't just happy words. This isn't just a poem that we read and go, well, that's very interesting, and then we go and do whatever we want. He says, if you do those things, well, then your life is going to be stable. But if you just listen to those things and go, that's nice, sand. Your house will fall down. La crisi will be able to tear you apart. Just before we came back to the U.S., there's a city just north of Ancona called Senegal. It's kind of a weird, freakish thing. We had crazy heavy rains, and then we had a crazy heavy windstorm that came and pushed water up so that a river wasn't able to drain. You know what I mean? How it pushes the water up and raises the level. And so they had crazy flooding in this tiny little town called Senegal. A woman that we know that our church is affiliated with, she had water up to the ceiling of the ground floor. And so there was, a big cleanup effort, and it did a lot of damage. And about, I don't know, 2 weeks after the flood, I was in that area, and I had to stop and fill up my car with gas. And I was kind of making small talk with the guy that was filling it up. And he was an older man. And I said, hey, did you have any damage from the floods? Were you okay? And I could tell, as soon as I said it, it was like a hot button topic for him. You know what I mean? He was just waiting for somebody to ask him. And he said, no, I'm not dumb. So, okay, well, good. I said, what do you mean? He said, well, he turned me around. He physically turned me around. He said, you see all this land up here on the hill? That's where I built my house. There's tons of room for people to build their houses. But no, everybody wants to be down by the sea, right? They want to be by the ocean. And in some places in Senegal, they're actually below sea level, right? Well, that's where everybody built their houses because they got a beautiful view, blah, blah, blah. And he said, I'm really upset because I know that the government is going to come and bail all these people out when they were dumb and built their house below sea level, 10 feet away from the sea. And I was like, you're grouchy. Like, you know what I mean? Like the flood just happened 2 weeks ago. It might be a little soon to say, you idiots, why'd you build your house there, right? But he has a point, right? I mean, you build your house in an unstable place, don't come crying to me when the flood comes, right? It's harsh to say it, and I don't know if that would be my campaign slogan if I was running as mayor, but you know what I mean? Like, you got to be, it's true. So you can't just hear, don't build your house in a flood zone, right? You have to put it into practice. Don't build your house in a flood zone, right? I found Italy to be a place that is full of contradictions. It's like every place, but I think since we're Americans, we're kind of these outside observers that get to watch these things from a distance. The book of Acts, right? Just after Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, Acts, right? Talks about the Apostle Paul, and it talks about how he wanted to get to Rome to preach the gospel. I've been to Rome. It's a real place. It's a real city. What's the next book after Acts? Romans. I know Romans. Actual Romans. They have a book written in the Bible, written to them. Isn't that crazy? Like, what would you do if there was a book called, what's a person from Willamina called? Willaminian, right? Would you read that book? Yes. And so, like, this country is steeped in church history, but it has walked away from all of it. There's a man named the Pope. Perhaps you've heard of him. He lives in the country where I live in. He's a real guy. And he really talks about what it means to live as a good Catholic. And people ignore him. Right? Less than 1%. Are you guys ready? Less than 1% of all of Italians, the whole country, claim to be evangelical Christians. Less than 1%. How many people are in this room right now? 100? Huh? 100%? Could you stand up right there? Right there. Just stand up. 99? That's the Christian. That's it. If I take 100 random Italians, there's going to be one Christian, one person that's following Jesus. She's it. My family has 6 of those Christians. You know what I mean? Like, there are so few Christians, and people are surprised to hear that fact. The rest, all the rest of us, 99%, right? We build our house on the sand. We might have heard the teachings of Jesus, but we're not putting them into practice. And so the crisi comes, and we're scared. We don't have anything stable, right? Just you. You're it. You're the only one. It happens to us too in Willamina, right? The minute we put our faith in houses, money, health, that's a big one, friends, the pastor, the church, government, the minute that we put any of our faith in those things, well, we're the guy building our house in Senegal below the sea level, right? You guys have seen sandcastle competitions where they make these enormous, I don't know how they do it, but they say it's just water and sand, right? They build these sea creatures, castles, like big castles, you know. But what happens the day of the sandcastle competition and a storm comes through? Let's go home, right? We can't do the competition anymore. The wind came and destroyed the sand because it's just sand, right? Are we ever like that? So what's our solution, right? It's easy for us to say, well, you just got to start going to church, right? It's easy for us to look at the guy that's building this house on the sand and say, no, you need to get yourself to church. But when you say that in Italy, what does that mean, right? What is church? They might have been to church, but that's not what Jesus said. He didn't say the person that goes to church builds his house on stable ground. What do we have to do? Put Jesus' words into practice, right? That's what we have to do. We could also say, well, you just need to stop sinning. That's the problem. Quit sinning so much, and then your life will be stable. How are you guys doing with the stopping of the sin in your life, right? That would be nice if it were that simple, but it's not. So we can't just tell the person who's building their house on the sand, stop sinning. We have to say, no, follow Jesus. Do what he said. And then your life is going to be stable. Right? Now we could say, maybe we learned our lesson, we could say, well, you just need to start following Jesus, right? But the problem is most people don't even know what that sentence means. What do you mean follow Jesus? Is he here today? Can I follow him? Like, what do I do? What does that mean? It's tough. So what do we do? How do I, the church planner in Ancona, Italy, tell the 110,000 people that live in my city, stop building your life on sand? Ancona is in the Marche region of Italy. It would be like a county. It would be like Yamhill County, I guess, of Italy. And there are a couple other churches in some of the surrounding cities. And once every 6 weeks or so, I get together with some of the other pastors. And we pray for each other and talk about what God is doing in Ancona or Pesaro or Pescara or all those different places. And I remember when the crisis really started picking up steam, when they really started talking about it on the news and people were worried about it. One of the pastors was talking about how half the church and half the congregation of his church lost work or underemployed. They don't make enough money to make ends meet. Like, what do we do as a church when suddenly our church members are losing their jobs? How do we help the community of Ancona when all of us know people that lost their jobs or their kids are going hungry? In first world Italy, this happens. What do we do? And I was so proud of another pastor, his name's Marco, and he said, well, I really feel like this is a huge opportunity for the church to be the church. What did they do in the book of Acts as a church when people had needs? They sold stuff, right? Guy would sell his field and give the proceeds to somebody that needed it. How many of us have ever done that? That's tough, isn't it? But what an amazing opportunity it would be for the people of Willamina if they saw the church band together to take care of its own that way. Isn't that putting our faith on something stable if we do that? I think people need to see that Christians live differently. Another thing that we do in Ancona to help people is, this sounds so simple. Does this cause you to question whether or not you've sent the right man to Ancona, okay? I went to a convention that was put on by evangelical university students, and they said one of the things that they've had the most success with in helping lead people to Jesus is called Studi Biblici per Curiosi. It means Bible studies for the curious. And what we do is we photocopy or copy and paste the text of the Bible, give it to people, and invite them to study a chapter of the Bible with us. That's it. That's kind of simple, isn't it? But what we have found is people have so many misconceptions about what the Bible really says. All those things that people think are in there, God helps those who help themselves, you know what I mean? Like all those lies. Like people don't even know what's in it anymore. But somehow they're like, no, I don't want anything to do with the Bible. And so we ask, but have you ever actually read it? That's what we do. So that's part of my job, is I sit in places and I read the Bible with people. And we just look at it a chapter at a time. And I'm like, hey, what do you think? Who are the main characters? What's Jesus want you to do? Are you going to do it? Sounds simple. I don't need my Bible college degree to do that. Right? That's something that anybody can do. You can do that today. We could walk out right now, go call someone, say, hey, do you want to read the Bible? I know it sounds cheesy and corny, but have you ever actually read what Jesus said? It's interesting because I feel like Italians don't want anything to do with religion, but they're a very spiritual people. They're very interested to read what he actually said, because it's not what they've been taught that he said. Another thing that we have to do if we're going to turn Ancona around is to be really patient. You guys ready for this? Ancona, last summer, celebrated its 2,400th anniversary as a city. How old is Willamina? Do we even know? A couple hundred years at the most, right? 110? Yeah? That's like nothing compared to Ancona. When the city did like a kind of a campaign, celebrating it, my thought was, how do you even know? Like, that's 400 years before Jesus. And that's when the city was founded. So in some ways I feel like if it took Ancona 2,400 years to get into the mess that it's in right now, spiritually speaking, it's going to take a while to turn the ship around, isn't it? You know what I mean? Like, I'm kidding myself if I think I'm going to go in there guns blazing and say, everyone follow Jesus, it's awesome. It's crisi proof, right? Now, I say that, and I know that God is powerful. And all he would do is have to say the word, and the ship would turn around. Am I right? If I do it, me, Brian, it's probably going to take 2,400 years. You know what I mean? But if God does it, it's going to take it. He loves the people of Ancona more than I do, doesn't he? He knows all 110,000 inhabitants of that city that aren't listening to what his son said, that have put their life on sand, that are watching the economy crumble around them, and they're scared and don't know what to do. It's the same in Willamina. He knows every single inhabitant of this city. And if it took 110 years to get us in this mess, it might take 110 years to get us out of this mess. But isn't that what God wants? Doesn't he want to see the people of this city and of Ancona and of every city building their life on stable stuff, which are his son's teachings? Oh, that's hard work, isn't it? There's so many misconceptions. There's so many things that people think are stuff Jesus wants us to do, but they have nothing to do with what Jesus actually said. So my challenge to you, my challenge to me, is to just teach people about Jesus. And then do it. Do it. Let's pray. Boy, God, I don't have all the answers, and our team is just four adults who you have put Ancona in their hearts, I guess. Father, I thank you for the fruit that we have seen. God, I thank you that we have a nucleus of believers in Ancona who want to see your kingdom expand there. Father, I thank you for this nucleus of believers here in Willamina, and I pray that the kingdom grows here too. Father, it's not just talk. We see how people suffer when they build their lives on sand. We see how their houses get destroyed when winds come in and things get unstable. And God, it hurts us to see our friends and our family and our coworkers and our classmates go through that kind of stuff. God, help us to be clear with people. Help us to set an example for what it means to follow your son and to put his words into practice. God, help the church in Willamina to be this enormous lighthouse, bright, showing people the way to you. Father, I thank you for the partnership that we have. Well, if I can use Paul's word, the partnership in the gospel from the first day until now that we have in Ancona and Willamina. God, it's incredible how you have put Ancona in these people's hearts as well. Thank you for using us, God. We fall so short of the perfection that you ask of us. Thank you so much that you provide the forgiveness that covers up all of our imperfections. God, it's a miracle that you didn't have to lower your standards in order to let us into your kingdom. You just raised the standards to perfections, and then you let your son forgive us. That's incredible, God, the way you worked that out. That's good news. I pray all these things in your name. Amen.
In the morning when I rise, in the morning when I rise, in the morning when I rise, give me Just give